Most welcome to this event that we have here today in Bergen Global, which is part of the International Week, and it's a collaboration between the Norwegian Afghanistan Committee and the Christian Michelsen's Institute. We are addressing in a singular country one of the largest challenges I think the world is confronted with these days, although we don't always discuss that much, that is the impact of climate change. And we are bringing up Afghanistan today because it at the moment is an extremely vulnerable country, having experienced 40 years of war, are at the moment under international sanctions, and there are limited funding available for actually doing something much about the climate change. So I'll go a bit into that into my introduction. But to dig into this, we have two eminent presenters today. They will come up later and present themselves, but maybe Najib, if you stand up and show yourself. That's Najib Kakar, Geohazards scientist at the GFZ German Research Center for Geosciences in Potsdam, Germany. But he has been involved as a PhD candidate for several years on a research project on climate change in Central Asia. You can say more about that. Afghanistan was part of this until last year, but now it's been excluded because of the sanctions on the Taliban. But Najib has also been a much sought for consultant and advisor for a number of organizations working on climate change in Afghanistan, including the Norwegian Afghanistan Committee. Which leads me to Gry Synnevåg, associated professor at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, Ås, as we say it here, and chairperson of the Norwegian Afghanistan Committee. But she's not only that, she has been a long track record of combining academic research with hands-on practical experience managing Norwegian NGOs in Afghanistan. And I think this is extremely valuable to be able to bring both academic perspectives and the practicalities, because you will be speaking about what has been possible to do from a Norwegian NGO side of it. So when these presentations are done, I have some questions, I think, to both of them. And then we will open for both to the floor here, but also for those of us you that follow us on Zoom. Please post your questions there in the question section, and then we will ensure that these two very knowledgeable persons will be able to provide you answers, I think, on everything you might have on your mind today. Or you'd like to join in the discussion based on your own experiences. Most welcome. I think we just go straight ahead a bit with my brief introduction on Afghanistan. Can we do that? Because we are talking about a country that have been now more or less at war for 40 years. I think we all, these days with Ukraine happening, can also recall that Afghanistan was subject to Soviet invasion back in 79, ended in 89, and then with Al-Qaeda based there, 2001, international forces, NATO and the UN went jointly in and have stayed then for 20 years. Now, withdrawing last year as the Taliban assumed responsibility for managing the country in Kabul. Den ligger där. Great. But this has left the country highly vulnerable. After the years with very limited response capacity, both for disaster, but also just for the population to cope, and I'll come back to that. And as Najib will be talking about, I'm not wasting time on it, to go into really what the impact of the climate change have had. Because what has been described as recurring drought for a number of years now, it's obvious, it's no longer something recurring, it's something permanent. And it's not only Afghanistan, it's Central Asia as part of the world. I think we've all seen recently floods in Pakistan beyond the imagination of what could be possible just a few years ago, India as well. And then comes with Afghanistan that it's highly aid dependent, used to be. Until last year, 75% of the government's budget came from international aid. That was cut overnight. It was cut to what has been one of the world's most poorest populations. It's also important to keep in mind that this is a fragile country in the sense that it's landlocked. And it's divided by the Hindu Kush range that would bring about frequent earthquake and following natural disasters. So there is nowhere to go. You need to rely upon your neighbors if you want to leave the country. If you not get on a plane to get out, you need to rely on your neighbors to get in supplies. So what we have seen is over the years, both because of non-response, because of the warfare, local conflicts and all of that, is then forest degradation, soil erosion, frequent droughts, and then follow-up of floods. And what I noticed myself some years ago is the lowered water table in large part of the country, including in Kabul, now 5 to 6 million that is desperately looking for access to clean drinking water. And I've been in several presentations saying that it's almost impossible to imagine that a country that received that high degree of aid for 20 years is at the moment one of the world's poorest countries. We have at the moment almost 55% of the population, or 22 million. Now, the latest figure is 24 million, so yesterday, that is in need of humanitarian assistance over the winter. 97%, according to UN, is ending up below the poverty line. Some of this didn't happen over the last year. It has been an accumulated development of it. And then you have a population that is really dependent on agriculture for survival, with 70% living in the countryside. And you have a very young population, a population that wants change, a population that wants something else than they are faced with today, with more than 63% under 25 years. And most of these are unemployed today. Some of the women are out of school. A lot of the boys and the girls are out of work. So it's an extremely challenging situation up in it all. And there is a growing concern that just continuing with humanitarian assistance that has been part of the aid regime will not resolve the underlying problems, including problems caused by climate change. So when Taliban came in and took power in Kabul on 15th August last year, there was a full stop in international development assistance. No support should go through the Taliban regime. They should not control the assistance. So a parallel channel for aid delivery with UN agencies and NGOs were established. Planes are coming in every month with US dollars, 38 million of them in cash. So with the stop and development assistance, it's basically what the international community is providing is what you can call basic services, some for education, some for health, then in addition to humanitarian assistance. Talking to some of the leadership within the Taliban Doha office I've done over the last month, they are also concerned about the climate change. This is one of the things that they have recognized as something they need to work together with the international community on. It's just that they feel they don't know how to do it, who to talk to. But then we also see, and this is where Gry will come in later on, things have been happening. NGOs, UN agencies have seen this coming for a number of years. Things have tried to be put in place, but the question is really, is it up to scale? Can it still continue as with the current sanction regime, or does change need to be made really to avoid what otherwise can be seen as a major disaster, not only for the Afghan population, but for the neighboring countries as well? So I think I'll leave it there, and then I'll leave it for you, Najib, to more go into details on explaining the seriousness of it.
Thank you, everyone who are here and who are watching online. I will be starting my presentation on one of the pictures that I usually show in my presentation to see the impact of the climate change and human-induced activities in the mountain range of Parakshan. It's a very small area, and you can count around 60 to 70 landslides affecting the communities. In the forest, it used to have a large forest here in the past. It's gone, and now the land is also going away, and we are having intense erosion processes that in the future, there won't be even soil left here to irrigate anymore. So it's also a rain-fed agriculture in this region. That's how the climate change is affecting that rain-fed agriculture in Afghanistan, where most northern Afghanistan is the communities are using this. So to go back into Afghanistan, everything in Afghanistan it's because of its topography, it's divided into different regions. The population, okay, we know above 35 million, but the mountain regions in Afghanistan, it's dividing it into different basins of irrigations, and then you have various agricultural lands, especially in the yellows, you can see that those agricultural lands and rainfed lands, which is mostly in the north area and some in the south. The glaciers are basically in the Pamir range in the Hindu Kush region where they are located. The lakes, there are few lakes which are available and they are also disappearing. I will give you some examples, but it's being affected by the climate change. And climate change is, it's affecting the whole country on different ways because it's not same everywhere. So where Afghanistan stands on the contribution into the climate change or the carbon or greenhouse gases. So if you see this graph, you can see the red one, the red circles, which shows the countries contributing to the greenhouse emissions. So it starts all these large countries from China and goes down to other countries, and down in this grayish or shows these countries which are highly affected. So Afghanistan stands at number 10 of vulnerable countries in the world, and it has very little to do with the climate or carbon emission or greenhouse gas emission in the world, like 160 something. But it's number 10 on the vulnerability. So Afghanistan in this case pays a higher price or multiple times of what the emissions or the industrial countries has brought to the climate change issues. This is one of the reports from the UNEP a few years ago. It was published. It shows the different prediction for Afghanistan, how it will look like. And they are also divided into different regions of Afghanistan. So if you see the average scenario that says that it will be around 2.3 to 2.6 degrees increase if everything goes as planned and controlled. But in a worst scenario, it will go up to 7 degrees, which is above average of the temperature for the world. And this is highly affecting the regions because the whole water issues in Afghanistan relies on the glaciers, and they are melting faster, and it's introducing new problems. In this slides, it shows that the past data, it's also processed by UNEP in Afghanistan, that we already experienced 1.8 to 2.0 degree increase in temperature centigrade. But the most important here we can see in this slide is the spring precipitation, where I showed in first map that most it's almost 27% decrease in spring precipitation. So it's affecting the rain-fed agricultural lands, where most communities in north they depend on, because in topography, the canneling, the large canals do not play a good role because it's because of the topography, but it is the rain-fed agriculture which plays roles for the community to rely on. On the other hand, and from one side, as Arne talked, that we are experiencing frequent drought, and also the longer periods are getting, and also on the other side, we are getting floods, flash floods, which we recently also experienced that. So this is one of the slides recently published by the IPCC, which shows Afghanistan is the Hindu Kush region will be extremely affected by the water stress because of the population, and the whole South Asia is going to experience that in a large scale. But here in this map, we can just see the Hindu Kush region, which will be, which for the water stress is extremely high. So that is a problem that we are going to experience in coming years, or we are already experiencing now. So coming to glaciers, the glaciers in Afghanistan are changing. There was a study conducted recently. It says that the glaciers of different parts, they are shrinking and melting faster than before. And there was decrease of 14% of glaciers area in Afghanistan between 1990 and 2015. And I don't know, because it takes more time. There is very less research conducted to see what is the updated picture of 2022. It takes time, and we need people to do that. So it's also projected that it will accelerate and in the century, and we'll have more problems. So, and the melting of glaciers, okay, one side the water is going away, but the other side it's introducing the glacier lakes, which is also becoming a common problem in Afghanistan for the communities, because they used to live for thousands of years, and now suddenly there is flood coming here. Like just an example here in Panjshir, it was a glacier outburst flood. The lake broke because now the water coming from the glaciers, they are melting fast, and there is no capacity of the lakes to hold those water. And all at sudden, you get unexpected flash floods in the community. The whole community is gone. So these red dot, the yellow dots you can see, these are the houses destroyed. And then it's also damming the water on the rivers, which is also a threat to the lower communities. So this is one of the examples. Many of them are happening, but people in Afghanistan, they think these are only floods happening, but there are also glacier outburst floods, which is becoming more common in many of these lakes, which are located in central Afghanistan, and also in the Hindu Kush Mountains will also have will experience such floods. So the projections for Afghanistan, as we talked, okay, from one side it's getting hotter, but some parts of Afghanistan will get wetter. So even if it is getting wetter and drier, like in south, you can see on this map, based on predictions that around Kabul is going to get wet, and in the north in some areas it's going to wet, but in the south areas in central Afghanistan, it's getting more hotter. That's both of them are problems. For example, in Badakhshan, we have mapped around 500 active landslides still exist, and you can see they are located within the communities. The green pixels and the reds, they shows the density of population, and all these landslides are located there. And this is how the widths, when it gets wetter, so you will get more landslides, and it will also erode the land for you, and it's causing another problem. And then you have earthquakes happening there, and altogether, it will remove the agricultural land, as we talked at the beginning, or you saw this big picture of it. And then this year, we also discussed that around Kabul will get wet. So we already experienced a flash floods in Afghanistan this year, which affected more than 3,000 or destroyed or partially destroyed 3,000 houses. And then we have 8,000 families were affected because of the floods, and more than 250 people died just within 2-3 days of the flooding. And this is something that Afghanistan is not prepared for. And because of all these challenges that Arne talked about, it's also contributing, the climate change is also taking a role in that, in affecting the communities. And in this picture, you can also see how much destructive this could be. Like this river used to be only a few meters, and now it's more than 500 meters wide because of the erosion processes. And those infrastructures that millions of dollars were spent to build the bridge is now not working. And there is something, it's instead of it's helping the communities, it's destroying the communities because lack of research is conducted. Then we go back to the south of Afghanistan. This is, you might have seen in some maps, in Google Maps, that there are some lakes that in the south between Afghan and Iranian border, and now we have problems with that. In 1993, you could see like Lake Zere had 2,600 square kilometers of area. It's gone. It's not there anymore. The water is not there. And Hamoon is drying up. And these, you can see these artificial lakes now Iranian, and it's inside Iran that they are still built, and they are there. So this is also introducing desertification, aridifications process, and then the communities are losing. It's not only for the communities to have the water, but it is also the biodiversity of the region. The migration of the birds which used to come here in these regions are not anymore. So it's the whole, the warming situation is also drying up these lakes. So these are natural lakes that were available there for a long time. It's not only the natural lakes, but also in central Afghanistan, if you go to Ghazni, we used to have these three nice lakes, reservoirs, one a natural lake, but we also have the reservoirs, Abban and Bandesar. There you can see there. In 1923, they were full, and I talked to my father, and he said we were driving for an hour or 2 hours around Bandesar, but now it takes only 10 minutes to drive because it's dried up. So now you can see in this image from Lancet, these are not available anymore. The water is gone. So the surface water is disappearing. The glaciers are disappearing, and the communities are now trying to find an alternative solution for them. So they are relying on groundwater now. So now this is one of the research that I'm working on to find out the effects of groundwater. So because of the extraction of groundwater in Ghazni only, we have 1 meter of land subsidence. So if land is subsiding, roads are being destroyed, you have cracks in the houses, you need maintenance, you have infrastructure destroying, you have a lot of sort of problems are getting apart from the climate because, and this is not only like in Ghazni, you can see in Kajaki, near Helmand, in Farah, in Herat, you see in Kabul, you have the same situation. In North, you have the same situation. So it's everywhere people are using groundwater, and it will introduce another problem, how long it will last to use those grounds. And this is dropping the water table. And with the drop of the water table, the ancient irrigation system in Afghanistan is totally destroyed. Almost 90–95% of Kares in Ghazni, which used to be a sustainable provision of water supply. So Kares is this vertical wells. You can see in this cartoonic graph, vertical wells, and they are interconnected under the land to make a canal. So these used to be very common in Afghanistan, but now because the water table dropped, and now there is alternative technology, water pumps and solar panels, to go 100 and 200 meters deeper to get the water, it dried up that. And this is not any more sustainable because people are using this a lot. So by drying up, now the balance is gone because there is high demand because of population and everything, and now you don't have enough water there. At the same time, if you go to the forest, Afghanistan is not green like Norway, but some parts it has on the eastern side because it is affected by the monsoon climate. So it has some forest, but it's also being affected because of the different aspects. So it's like people from one side, it's climate change, which is drying it up, and then we are also in Afghanistan. We don't have energy, so it's used as the energy sources to warm up in winters. And wildfires happened in 2022. We don't know. There is no research why they happened, and it lasted for months, not only for days. It lasted for months, and no one could stop it because there is no means they are available. And these are not only forests, like it's also dry fruits. It's income for the communities. Like if you see pine nuts cost almost around 50 euros or $50 per kilo. So it's like hundreds of tons of pine nuts, and now it's gone. So it's becoming less and less, and the communities are also losing those incomes for them. So to sum it up, like Afghanistan, it's divided into different regions, and different parts of Afghanistan are affected by different disasters. Either it is floods, or it's landslides, or it is drought. And they have different economic implications. According to the Global Facility Disaster and Recovery Report, it says the highest economic shocks comes because of drought, because most population are relying on agriculture, and we agree we'll talk more about that. And then earthquakes and floods because of the destruction of infrastructures and so on. And also the fatalities are coming more because of the earthquake, because it's the communities are not following the building codes, and the houses are not safe anymore. So to sum up, climate change impacts in Afghanistan are proven. So we have quite a lot of examples of it. The natural resources are not only stressed by it's under stress because of the different all sides. So it's climate change, it's economy, it's the increase in population, and then introducing more problems into that. It's estimated the situation is going to get worse because of the water availability, which will also introduce conflicts. And we already have community conflicts where the community conflicts resolution program go on, but it became regional upstream and downstream, and now it's becoming to the countries. So we started to have negotiation with Iran, and now soon we will have with Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan because of the new canal that they are building in North Afghanistan. And then we have no solved water treaty with our neighbors also. And Afghanistan is an upstream country for that. Communities are also migrating. This is also a problem, and they are leaving their farming because no water is there, and they are leaving their livestock, and they are going to alternative solutions of jobs, or traveling to Iran, or getting jobs in Turkey or in Pakistan, whatever, or in the cities. Before they were going to cities, now it's not available, jobs are not available there also. And of course, there is very limited research to understand the full impact of climate change in Afghanistan. If you go to literature, there are few examples or few papers available, and it became a very common issue within the academia in Afghanistan with the university that they started to research, but unfortunately with the recent fall of the government, all these researchers and the experts are leaving the countries, and they don't have any means to do research. And we are also banning we already banned because of the sanctions, there is no funding going to the universities to do research. So it's also an alarming situation to understand the full impacts. And that's why we have to find a way that we can continue this and understand more of the impacts in Afghanistan. Yeah, so I will that's all from my side. And then, yeah, great.
Just to the next slide. Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
Najib.
Where do I press? Yes.
Here.
It's a bleak picture, but it's important that we understand how bleak it is and what consequences are. So if you take a seat here, and then please.
Thank you very much. And thanks to you, Arne, to set the scene, and thanks to you, Najib, for this excellent presentation on showing how climate is really changing, and it's changing now. So what I'm going to do is to talk about the impact of those changes on agriculture development and food security in particular. And then I will talk a bit about the constraints and opportunities for small-scale farmers, to adapt to those changes. And then I will present some lessons learned from the work that the Norwegian Afghanistan Committee has made in Afghanistan. And I would say that most of my examples is from the Norwegian Afghanistan Committee, as I have been working with the Afghanistan Committee for a number of years now. Okay, first of all, some statistics. It's boring, but it shows the importance of agriculture as the backbone of the economy and as a critical source of food security and poverty reduction. Arne presented some statistics. 70% lives in rural areas. 80% of the population depend on those natural resources and crops and livestock for survival. And most of the farmers are smallholder farmers with less than 5 hectares. And it's written somewhere that 50% of the farmers are subsistence farmers. Agriculture provides the income for 61% of the population. 44% of the workforce are employed in this sector. 60% of employed women in rural areas are employed in the livestock sector. So over the past years, climate change has impacted agriculture development and food security a lot. And the small-scale farmers, herders, and vulnerable groups, female-headed households, for example, are the first to suffer for this increasing risk of droughts, floods, and natural hazards. They erode the resources and assets and forces people into negative coping mechanisms and vulnerability. And a recent study that I saw shows that 51% of the farmers that was interviewed in this study from the center of the country, had a very high exposure to climate change, high sensitivity, and a very low adaptive capacity. So what we see is that climate change impact not only ecosystems, but also food systems and food security. It impacts both land, pastures, water, agrobiodiversity, and soils. It also impacts the whole food system from production to consumption, the whole value chain and all the different steps in the value chain. But it also impacts seriously food security, the availability of food produced at the farmers level and in the market. It impacts the economic and physical access that people have to buy the food. It impacts the nutritional outcome as less food, less water, less possibilities for sanitation and hygiene, and then higher malnutrition among women and children. So there are many constraints for smallholder farmers to be able to adapt to climate change. And these constraints are compounded. And the decreasing production of staple crops we have mentioned, I have seen that it's below average because of the 2-year consecutive droughts. And it has impacted on the income that is now seriously reduced from agriculture production. Also, the higher prices of fuel inputs and food, of course, are important. For example, I've seen that the fuel prices are up with 89% compared to 5 years back. Food prices are much higher. So all these influences the possibility to invest in some kind of adaptation measures. In addition, farmers have been dependent on the internally funded program and project that are now stopped. So all kind of agriculture support has stopped. And this, of course, also contributes to a lower surplus. In addition, there are lower remittances from abroad because of the financial situation in Europe. The extension services is extremely poor or non-existent. So how to get the knowledge and skills to be able to adapt to the challenges. And there is even lack of access to credit and business opportunities that make the problem even worse. So all in all, this is weakening smallholders' coping capacities and give farmers a very little adaptive capacity to be able to cope with the situation. So, what is it possible to do in that situation? How is it possible to improve the situation for small-scale farmers and herders and vulnerable groups? So the objective, let's say something about the Afghanistan Committee first before I come to the concrete actions. So the Afghanistan Committee has the objective to empower rural communities, reduce poverty, and improve livelihoods. It works multi-sectorally with agriculture and food security, disaster risk reduction, health and education. The humanitarian aid is 27% of the budget, and the long-term development projects are 70% of the budget. The total budget is about 120 million, and it's increasing. And it's about we have 2,500 employees, temporary and permanent, in Afghanistan, and 30% of the permanent employed are women. And we also have female heads of different provincial offices. Gender and human rights are cross-cutting through everything we do. And it's a member-based and solidarity-based organization that remains committed to Afghan people, regardless of power holders. We are there for the Afghan people. We work in several provinces, mainly in Ghazni, for integrated rural development programs in Ghazni, Faryab, and Badakhshan. and then we have health and emergency project in other provinces, like for example, Paktia, Kapisa, Khost, Nangarhar, also some work in Kabul. Okay, so I think if we look at the approach or the approach that we use to improve adaptation to climate change or improve food security and in general, it's the community development approaches to enhance local enhancement on the ground, local empowerment on the ground. So we use community-based, driven and locally led action. With the entry point to CDCs, shuras, and jirgas at the community level. We use a triple nexus approach. That means that we combine the humanitarian, the agricultural or the development and peace sector. And we do that by combining humanitarian support with long-term agricultural development and training in something we call also dialogue and conflict transformation. And we think that that approach will reduce aid dependency and increase resilience, and also finding solutions to conflicts, because land and water is the two main causes of conflict. So the objective within the agriculture sector is improved food security and income through a more diversified and sustainable agriculture adapted to climate change. And activities can be both, it can be technological, it can be institutional, it can be economic, and it can be environmental, depending on the context and the need, because the work is need-based. So if we group this into these four activities, we can say that we work with diversified crop and livestock best practices. We do strengthen institution and community-based natural resource management of watershed, forest, and pastures. We do micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises for income generation, and construction of rural infrastructure for disaster risk reduction and irrigation purposes. And I will very rapidly go through some of the examples within those four categories of activities. When we come to the technological opportunities for improving livelihoods or mainly food security and adaptation to climate change, it can be done by improving cropping or the husbandry sector or socioeconomic means. But for example, when it comes to the crops, it's possible to look at the whole seed sector. Is it possible to introduce more drought-resistant varieties and new crops? The formal seed system has collapsed. The informal seed system is still working. Is it possible to strengthen this informal system in a way so that we don't make dependency of humanitarian aid as packages with seeds and fertilizer and whatever it is? So is it a way we can combine, for example, subsidized input? Because inputs and humanitarian aid is necessary at the moment. So how can we deal with this in a way that not creates aid dependency in the long term? There are many climate smart agriculture technologies that can be introduced, but they all need resources. So the whole issue of how to ensure those resources and what resources are needed. What kind of knowledge, what kinds of skills and resources are necessary to be able to implement those. Many don't have the economic possibilities to implement those technologies. So it's very important that those technology is low cost and low tech, and that it's carried out or led, or it's need-based, and it's led by the local community itself, simply said. I'm not going all through, but you can see here there are many different activities that can be carried out. Some NGOs forget the livestock sector, but I think it's very important to remember that most small-scale farmers have a mixed crop livestock system. And it's important also to work with livestock to be able to improve both income and nutrition, and in particular because it can empower women. Economic empowerment of women can go through livestock, the livestock sector. Women can get income from breeding small ruminants. They can get income from the wool, from the products, butter, yogurt. Every one of you that has been to Afghanistan and been eating in somewhere, you have tasted the yogurt, for example, that is made. And that can also be sold for intergeneration and scaled up. So these are some examples. Then, of course, we have all these technological options, but at the same time, we need to build people's capacity to use those options. So that's what we call to build adaptive capacity. And to build this adaptive capacity, it's important to involve traditional community-based committees and institutions. And for example, it's important to support and enable pasture management committees, forest management committees, water management committees, disaster management committees. All these committees are already there. Before lots of funding went through the CDCs, the Community Development Councils. That has more or less stopped now. So it's a gap in the service delivery. And these people these committees might be able to take over the role and really create action that can help people to reduce their vulnerability and, for example, to adapt better to climate change. It's also important to work with agriculture schools and universities. It's difficult now because you cannot fund them because of the political situation, but you can work with students. You can give students internships in our projects to have practical experience. You can make training programs in climate smart agriculture. So there are many things you still can do with schools and universities to make this sustainable in the long run, the transfer of knowledge. When it comes to the economic opportunities, I think in particular for women, micro enterprise development is for women in particular is still possible today. And we have seen that from Afghanistan. There are many ways you can, for example, create and support female self-help groups. You can give them a small start capital, or you can just help them to build social capital by saving and loans training or small-scale business development. You can help connect to markets, because now with the restricted mobility of women, to connect to markets is extremely difficult. So you have to find ways. And what about the female-headed households that don't even have a husband to follow them to the market? So you have to find ways and be creative. How can you now involve women? There are many ways that can be done still. Women have traditionally a role in this sector. And also, for example, how can you store products that are made over winter? That's you can do it simple. You can do it with low-cost technologies. So it's important to find these ways of working. So to a very important point, and that is construction of agro-based infrastructure. Agriculture and land and water are the two main inputs for production. And I think both Arne and Najib mentioned that. And actions to adapt to this water crisis is urgent. And there is a huge need in the community for small-scale agro-infrastructure projects. to improve access to water and protect agricultural land. So this construction involves, as you see here, many different technological structures that I don't know too much about. I'm not an engineer, but I have seen them, and I've seen the huge impact they have on communities. For example, construction, rehabilitation of water canals for irrigation purposes, cleaning of terraces, water reservoirs, and check dams. And another construction activity is protective infrastructure for disaster risk reduction. Here you have, for example, flood control dams and reservoirs, protection walls, as you can see on the picture, aqueducts and upper catchment rehabilitation. All this is extremely important in mountainous areas. If you have seen the damage done by floods and erosion and the way communities cannot even be connected to each other, these activities are extremely important, and there is a huge need in the community for those, and they don't have resources in a high degree. It's possible to do it cheap and cheerful, but still it's difficult to get money from international donors for this work, and I don't know why. In that particular sector of activities, infrastructure, that's where this triple nexus approach is used a lot. For example, you do the construction work is done by community contracting. The construction work is done by employing people by the Food for Work, Cash for Work programs of the World Food Program, and the training and in conflict and dialogue and conflict transformation is helping ensuring an equal distribution of the water for irrigation that is end product of this process. The disaster management committees are controlling, overseeing this work, but this I have asked Najib to say a little bit more about. Can you do that?
So the disaster management committees, we used to have the Norwegian Afghanistan committee used to have an approach to do the community-based disaster risk reduction. So whether it contains different groups that were responsible for different activities, like for communicating the activity with the district, and then the district level was communicating with the provincial and then the central government. At the same time, we had teams that were trained on search and rescue and first aid in case a disaster happens, because these are mountainous regions, and and the help does not reach there, especially when an avalanche happens in winter. The roads are closed. The only way is via helicopter. So the communities should have at least some basic knowledge so they can support each other at that time. But at the larger scale, not only like the communities we were training, but we also shifted to the school children, because these are the next generation of Afghans who we try to establish these communities within the schools, and then they were responsible to teach other students in the school. Like every morning they get together and they deliver the message about the hazards and disasters and how to avoid them, not to, if there is a avalanche seasons, we have information to them so they can deliver it to the schools communities. On the other side, like constructions, as you discussed, these constructions are not only protecting the communities, like it's also protecting the basic services in the markets. For example, this one protection wall. It's maybe small scales, but it has a big impact on the communities. And usually, many communities come together and work on this. So it's as you said, it's economic, but it is also bringing people together that they can work to solve those issues that they have. And these issues are identified by the communities themselves. Like, okay, we need a protection wall, or we need a water a canal for the irrigation, and then it's delivered and they're shared, and then they come into common agreement. So it's not only like We do, okay, it's a protection wall, it's done, but it is many other things that are happening behind in the communities, in bringing the communities together, and the economic impacts, like as you said, the community contracting, or someone is bringing the stones, it gets it's an income for the families there. Some of them are selling the cements in the local market, so it's also his shops, businesses going on. So it's all the activities that are leading one another in also supporting the whole families in the whole system at the community level, which is very micro level. But and these small scale activities are very important for the communities. And then at the larger level, it needs a lot of funding, but it's not available as to the NGOs to do 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers of protection wall. That's more governmental work. So we focus on the communities, and we see a lot of impacts for those specific communities that are targeted. And there are many examples of that.
Thanks a lot, Najib. So in the end, I just want to present some lessons learned, some lessons to take away from this. The first lesson is that emphasis on medium long-term agriculture is through NGOs and customary institutions are important to improve food security and to foster ownership and sustainability. We can discuss this more, but today most of the funding goes to UN. And in any case, UN is contracting NGOs to do the work. So NGOs are the ones working in the field and can do this. They are flexible. They have trust in the community. They know the community. And I think more funding should go through NGOs for action, because action is urgently needed. The second is that increasing amounts of humanitarian assistance will continue to be required. It's sad, but that's the situation in Afghanistan today. It has to be combined with long-term agricultural development to be sustainable, so we can sustain the impact of these investments in the long run. More work will need to continue on conflict mitigation and conflict-sensitive models for community-based natural resource management. There are lots of conflicts occurring. To avoid these conflicts, to scale up, it's important that we continue to work on conflict mitigation. And we do have a very close collaboration with the Nansen Peace Center. And we are using those tools, and we are training connectors at the community level that are again training people at the community level. And we have seen what kind of impact this has to improve dialogue in conflict situations. I'm sure we can get some questions to this. We have also seen that portfolio needs to be diversified to reduce risks. It's always good to have many legs to stand on, at least two, in such an environment with so many conflicts. It's very important now to be creative about maintaining women's agency and involvement, cross-cutting through all projects. It's a need for more agro-infrastructure, but must be through low-tech, low-cost, and adapted to local context and community contracting. I think that's important a lesson learned. And adaptive capacity of small-scale farmers need to be strengthened to reduce the impact of negative coping mechanisms. So these are some lessons learned. And in the end, I just wanted to say some few words, and that is that the Norwegian government has now climate change adaptation high up on the agenda. They have, I think they have 2.7 billion NOK that should now go to climate change adaptation. So I'm then saying to the government that to be able to make a real change, let's listen to the people on the ground who lives in poverty and do have solutions, but no resources. And also the organizations that are their voices to the international community and to donors. And as I said, local NGOs have this opportunity and they have this understanding. And I'm just wishing that this time when we make strategies and plans and we have conferences and meetings and we discuss what to do in Afghanistan to improve livelihoods and climate change adaptation, and I don't want to know what we use lots of resources on those discussions. This time, let's take the herders and take the farmers with us to anchor the solutions at the community level and get some real change. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gry. I think just sit there. I will open up for questions. I'm sure there might be questions, and I'm asking people on Zoom also to send in their questions. I'm following up that. But I thought just to kick off with one question for each of you. Mm-hmm. Because what Gry is also saying, Najib, is that there are limited resources. Yes. So from your research, and maybe allow yourself a cynical approach to it, are there some mitigating efforts? Are there some project that you think can hold a larger impact than the others?
There used to be start of some projects in fundings like Green Global Climate Funds. They started some agriculture or reforestation projects in Afghanistan, and they were looking into the, if you speak at globally, so it's like greenhouse gas limitations, so it's to have the whole impact, but the contribution of Afghanistan is very less to that, because it's not an industrialized country. So we have but still there were some measures taking place. So I was discussing with the NEPA, National Environmental Program of Afghanistan, so with some colleagues and friends there, and they were saying they are developing policies to tackle those problems and develop projects for them. And they were basically related because of the technical knowledge, lack of technical knowledge, and specialists in the government sector. They were relying more on the consultants, and they were mostly funded by the other organizations to work for them, for the government. They are gone at that time, but there were a lot of mitigations planned in projects that would have held a big impact on the communities at the larger scale, like reforestation projects. Every year they plan to have more than a few million of tree saplings that would planted, and then the protection of the forest and introducing new national parks to keep the biodiversity and ecological species alive. At the moment, they are not there anymore. So it's like there were some efforts at large scale that could have impacts, but at the moment we don't know how much they will go in the future. So the government and the specialists, they were working. They started to do a lot of research, because sometimes we see that we just take a copy of a model from other countries in South Asia and apply it to Afghanistan. It doesn't work always, and then we don't have a research. It works, okay, it's very good working in Nepal, or it's working in India or in Pakistan, but Afghanistan is a different climate, in a different communities, in different government systems. So that's also making us leading to understand first the problems, and then we can go on for the mitigation purposes. So that is what started within academia in Afghanistan. They started to look into the problems, and we started to have a lot of discussions with the experts. And recently, some of my colleagues, they were working on the development of new policy for Afghanistan or adaptation of climate change. It did not publish yet. So they were like almost 80-90% done, and then it stopped. So still at the same time, for disaster risk reduction, they were for the Sunday framework, they were working to develop the reports and policy to get more fundings from them, because at the UN you have to provide reports, then you get funding for that. And then that was also at the end, it was just not finished. So
the sanction regime is really hurting.
Indeed, that's the thing. But now the people I knew that we used to work on the climate impacts or the analysis, or either they are leaving now the country, or they already left, or there is no funding of their projects. They are halt. I used to work for one of the projects at the Ministry of Agriculture, and now that no one is working there anymore because there is no funding. It was a 10-year project to do a lot of disaster risk reduction and climate studies, but now it's stopped.
Thank you. I'll combine one of the questions coming in here with the plan I had planned for you already, Gry, but because the question that is coming in from Mursal Saba is, which NGOs are getting funding from Norway to be on the ground in Afghanistan and to work with these issues? And my question was almost the same. Because Norwegian Afghanistan Committee is working on this, but what other agencies are involved? The UN agencies? Is this a common concern among the international or the Afghan NGOs? And is there an opportunity to scale up this work?
I think the work that we do is just a drop in the ocean, of course, and it needs to be scaled up to have a much bigger impact. We see that what we do has a huge impact, but it needs to be scaled up. And what we see today is that most of the funding is through UN, and it goes through, and it's humanitarian assistance, mostly. I think they have started to discuss to broaden this up, but at the moment, it's mostly humanitarian assistance. So I think this combination and to try to combine this with long-term agriculture development is extremely important. But how is it possible to do that when you don't have governmental services in place? The government is responsible for basic needs, in theory. And at the moment, the government is not able to give these services because of the sanction regimes. So there is a huge gap in service delivery to the people. So the sanctions that we have talked about is, of course, driving people into further poverty, as it is today. I don't know if it had any impact on the human rights situation. You said something about yesterday that was quite interesting, but at the moment, it doesn't look like. So how do we then scale this up with limited resources? Of course, the Afghanistan Committee work with other Norwegian-funded, like, for example, Kakar. It works together with Aga Khan, I think. It works together with IRC, Save the Children's, other organizations on the ground. And we get 50% of the funding from NORAD and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we get 50% from UN, EU, and private funds. And we are getting more because UN is contracting us now, and NGO sector more and more because they know we can do the work on the ground. So that's why we are growing, but we need to be careful as well. We want to do quality work on the ground. And we want to push, of course, policymakers to understand that this cannot be done by creating parallel structures to the government because it will not be sustainable in the end. So this is a big difficulty, I would say, the whole sanction regime. So I don't know if that's an answer to the question.
No, I think it is. And I can add, because I'm into a research project with the European Union now, and it's very different approaches taken by different countries. I think Norway has been what I would call forward-leaning in continuing small-scale development projects, while some of the other countries have put a full blockage to it. So but there is a discussion going on now because there is a recognition that, like the agriculture sector, health sector, education sector, there is a need to provide assistance, but then it's to find a way and means to do that within the sanction regime. So it's challenging. Can I invite someone in the audience to pose questions here? I have two. I'll start on the left. If you stand up and say your name, and then you can have a question box there.
Okay. Hi, Niels Peter-Hansen. How is the cooperation with the political system in Afghanistan? How is the acceptance and the channels to work with them to accept these necessary things?
Then you start.
Yes, of course, we are not able to fund the government and not have any formal collaboration, but of course, to be able to carry out activities, you need to coordinate with the government, and you need allowance to work. And one thing that is much more easy now than before is access to the project sites. It's no war anymore, it's peace. It's possible to move from one place to another and to bring what you need into the communities, if it's humanitarian aid or if it's transport of other issues. So it has become a little bit more easy to work because of the political situation, but of course there are many difficulties, and particularly the restrictions on women, of course, at the moment. That is absolutely very difficult to accept. But then Norway was forward-leading, as Arne said, by inviting the whole Taliban delegations to Norway in March last year. I don't know if it had any results, but at least it was an opening for a dialogue with the Taliban leadership. And I think in our organization, we do have good communication, even if it's not formal collaboration. So I don't know if that is, if that's an answer. Thank you.
If I can add something from the research, it seems that there are big differences locally, because if the local governors are elected locally, then they are very often much more inclined to listen to local demands and ensure that, and then contact the NGOs as well to ensure that there is a delivery, including on girls' education. So this local bottom-up approach seems to work even if there is a government with strong restrictions on some of the things. But Najib, you know people within this government. Do you like to add something?
Yes, it's like within the government system, it's at the moment it's very complicated. You can see you have an order from up which says it stops, but locally, if the commander is hired or some commander is from Ghazni city or around, and if he wants to do something without informing the higher authorities, or which is not very much sensitive issues, they just continue with it, or they ask the higher level that, okay, the people are demanding it, so they just stay with that for a limited areas. But if it start to expand a lot, then, like for example, if few schools started to open and I think it was in Host, and then because it was a local initiative, and then the media started to talk about it, and it started to have a larger discussion, then they just stopped that one also. So some of such things, as you said, locally are happening, but once it goes up and it gets a larger impacts, then it's stopped, or there are a lot of things happening and locally, and it's not being reported even to the central government, and they just relay at the local communities. They decide, okay, if the kids or the schools are open, they can just go, or other projects that are being implemented. But once it gets to the higher level, then if they say stop, then they don't have an option on that. Sometimes they could be like, okay, they could be flexible at a certain, but not a lot. So they are very strict in doing things, and they are very careful at the moment because everyone is watching them.
Thank you. Örjan?
Örjan Fresvik. Är det en mikrofon? Yes. Ja, flott. Ja. The big canal projects up north from Kunduz down to Mazar and Balk and into Faryab. A few weeks ago, they opened 45 kilometers of it, but the whole thing is going to be close to 200 kilometers long.
Yes.
But will it ever be? What does the Tajik and the Uzbeks and the Turkmen say? Are they happy about this, and will they allow it? The Aral Sea down there is already dry.
Yes. So this is, I was also in the last couple of weeks working on this report on the Potsdam Canal, which is supposed to be started from Kunduz, but they shift the intake into Mazar at the moment. So it's like a bit down. So the Tajik government is okay because it's almost end of the border, so they don't use the water. But the plan was to divert almost around 25 to 30% of Amudarya water into this big Qushtepa canal. And some of my colleagues back in German Research Center for Geosciences, because we work with the Central Asia, and then they said that it's not being even discussed at the Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan and water issues. So it will come up soon there, and of course they will not be happy. And this is what Afghanistan, if you see that the reports which were prepared before, because there is no water distribution or transboundary water issue resolved with the northern neighbors, so they were not also getting fundings for such projects, or no one was largely funding these projects. So now the Taliban started to work on this. They open like 40, it's yearly 43 kilometers, but I was checking the maps. So in the last 6-7 months, the work has been extremely fast without the funding coming from out. And because this is also what the Taliban now need, because they have to, they think that this water canal will be sufficient for wheat production for the whole population, and they will start to move more population from other areas to distribute lands, new lands for them, up to 500 hectares of new land and irrigated land. So, of course, the transboundary that I mentioned in my presentation also, that transboundary issues are coming up. And because if you see to the trends of Amudarya Basin, the water is already disappearing. And Oral Lake is dried up. Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan are experiencing extreme droughts. And now if 20% of the water is diverted in Afghanistan, it is going to be problems. And that's why we have to keep engaged at the regional level to find a solution. Like conflicts are already happening in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. They are fighting on water now. So it will come to South. Afghanistan and Iran are also discussing with the water treaty on that. And with Pakistan, we have also the same problem. So this, as you mentioned, they are not happy. But the problems will come when the intake is in place, or maybe it will be a military or without military solutions, or I hope it's not, again, a military problems, but to sit in find a solution to distribute, because 30% of water goes to Amudarya from Afghanistan, as the sources are from Afghanistan. So if they take a percentage of water back to these areas, should be a resolvable issue, because only Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan could not use 100% of the water available. So Afghanistan should also have a share. And I don't know how that will be solved, but that depends on the future of the government in how the development of canals go on.
Of course, the people or the countries on the northern side of the river, they have been very clever for many years. I think they started the whole thing in 1942. That was the Soviet Union. But because of all these wars, or the war in Afghanistan haven't used that water to as much as they could.
Yes. And this is the argument that they can go.
This is the argument that
this will be the argument that they can say, okay, you have been using it in 100% for many, many years, and now we want to have a share of 20 to 25% from this, because we are using Kunduz River, Takhar River, and Kokcha River, not the main Amudarya, only small parts that are used in Takhar and also in some parts in Balkh. But this will be a larger portion that Afghan government or Afghanistan will take from the Amudarya.
And they say next year they'll have 100 kilometers more of the canal ready. I don't know.
The work is very fast.
The work is very fast.
It's going on very. Taliban are saying that they will complete before the planned 5 years of project, but still there are questions on the distribution of canal. So it's one main canal. Okay, you can build it, but how you distribute, how you resolve the land issues, the ownerships and distribution. There are many issues. Like a few days ago, there was a conference where Dostum was also about talking about these issues for the Uzbek populations, because the land distribution problem will also arise. So it will also be a conflict zone for everyone will want to have agriculture and irrigated land, a larger part of it. So in how Taliban will act on that in the future, you have to wait a few years on that.
Well, for the information, they say they're going to have new land, 600,000 hectares, or 500,000, 5 millioner mål, and they will settle 60,000 new families in that area. There's quite a lot of people.
It's still discussion, but it will happen one way or other way, because the population, if they build the canals, there will be need for manpower to go and work. And how this will be decided, it depends on the Uzbek majority communities or Tajik majority communities, and also Hazaras are living in Mazar. So then they have to in Pashtuns also. So then it will be within the tribe. I hope it will not be a tribal issues coming up in the future that we had experienced in the past.
And then one more question.
But you have to wait because I have 3 in line here. So
You take the online.
the first is very concrete to you, Guri. How have Afghan women been involved in these projects that you mentioned?
Okay, I think I showed it. First of all, we have created self-help groups for women, and that has been very helpful. It has contributed to both social cohesion, income generation, small-scale businesses are created. So that's one way we have involved women economically and also socially. The other way is to involve women in the livestock sector, as they are doing most of the livestock work. We have not done as in the next project phase, we are doing more. But that's what we are thinking, that we need to involve women more in the livestock sector. And we have, not the least, we have women lead farmers. They are working together with their male colleagues to create knowledge to farmers and their fellow farmers in absence of extension services. So these lead farmers, both male and female, are doing a great job to create both awareness about climate change and to come up and build knowledge and skills about how to solve these problems. So we have, I don't know the number of female lead farmers, but it's quite high. And in fact, I've read somewhere that they are doing a better job than their male colleagues. So I don't know if that's general, but.
And then there was a related question here, saying that climate change crisis is gender biased in the sense that globally it will affect women more than men. For example, conflicts around food and water resources can ignite the domestic violence, scarcity of water leads worse sanitation and worse birth care. And the question is, have you observed this effect in Afghanistan? And the question is, how can it be combated? But in a sense, you are talking about providing opportunities for women, but this conflict dimension, is that something that has also been seen more broadly, not only for women, but generally, I think what Örjan's question pointed towards as well. Is this a source of conflict?
The actions to combat the climate change.
And that women might be more severely affected by the climate.
Well, we can see women are severely affected when it comes, so women are mainly at home. And everything that makes their work more hard at home, everything, and for example, when it comes to water issues, if women don't have water, it will be much more difficult for them to even to do the domestic work. So of course it has an impact on women, and it also has an impact through, for example, nutrition, which we have seen is much worse now. 1 out of 5 children are malnourished in Afghanistan, and for example, women under pregnancy, lactating women, they have a big problem because they don't have enough food to eat because of not only the climate change issue, but also because of the climate change issue. And maybe you can add something more.
I have a different question for you.
Okay.
Because it's from Ahmad Yassir. Do Taliban really care about climate change or the consequences of it? How is their knowledge and awareness when it comes to climate issues?
Well, the knowledge and awareness is low. It was even before, so within the experts that we used to have, so there weren't a lot of things because of the war. They could not implement a vast amount of fundings that were provided. There is law knowledge, but still the law level of the employees still exists. And they opened recently the National Environmental Protection Agency back. So that is a development that they, at least by name, they started to, okay, the colleagues started to come back to the office, but I don't know if they will have projects or not. That's something else. And they follow the guidelines were developed like in the previous governments. They started to follow that one. In terms of knowledge that they work, I don't know. It's already, if they are changing the heads of the departments and everyone is becoming a religious leader is leading those expert departments, I don't see a good future for it. But they have to say, okay, if they want to have a political leader in some of the ministries, okay, that's fine. But when it comes to climate change, environment, you need experts. And not someone who comes from madrasa or someone with a knowledge that can only that has very limited knowledge of what's going on globally and how Afghanistan is being affected, because most of these people that are getting these expert positions, they come from somewhere like, okay, very with a very small background. And that's also like I talked to some of my colleagues or researchers. They says when they talk to us, and then we feel ashamed to be even working there. So it's like someone is ordering things which does not make sense. And when it does not make sense, then it's hard for us to work. Like I have a PhD, I have a postdoctoral coming from the UK back or from the European, from US, I'm here back, and then someone is talking to me something that it's not totally against my field. So the knowledge is less, but hopefully they realize it soon before it is too late, and let the expert positions, the experts to work and let them on their jobs. So at least they can continue, and they have to provide them more political supports.
Just want to add a little comment on the women issue, because when we talk about women in this setting, and we talk about rural women, we talk about poor women mainly, and we talk about women with a very little level of literacy. So when we talk about how this impact of those women, it will take them even deeper down in poverty. And that, I think, is the main issue here. When we talk about, for example, how the conflicts affected women, the war, I mean, that has a huge impact. We have 2 million female-headed households in Afghanistan today that have lost their men, lost their husbands, and are responsible for their livelihoods. How to support them now, today. So, but we talk about women in the rural areas with very little education and high level of poverty. So we just have to remember that when we talk about what we can do and how they are involved, because that's different from talking about women with education in the cities, of course, that is suffering a lot these days.
No, I think that's a very important distinction. So even if security has improved, maybe in rural areas, they are still limited by their knowledge and by their lack to markets if they do their own business, or to the lack of funding to develop their business.
Absolutely.
Did you have one final question, Jan? And then is there anyone else with a final question on the net or in the audience?
The next question is about drip watering. Is that in use?
There are many horticulture projects, particularly within fruits and vegetables, that would be very important to look into. But again, it comes to the cost. So we, as far as I know, we haven't been able to work with drip irrigation, but you might know that better than Najib.
There is the initiative started in some provinces, and that I worked with some projects like in Nangarhar, and also in Ghazni we have some examples, but they started to use groundwater for this issue. And this is what I see in the time series analysis of these subsidence of the city of Ghazni. I see like a very less subsidence through 2015, 16, and 17, and 18. Suddenly, a big jump in the subsidence, and it's doubled every year till today. So it reached up to 1.2 meters of subsidence of the whole city is going down, like subsiding. And then I talked to my friends, like, what happened in 2018? And this is what they said, that there was a huge projects that they started to have this agricultural farms, small farms, that they produce more, but they rely only on the groundwater. So this also has because the surface waters has disappeared, and in the consistent droughts are also introducing new problems. And that's also go back to Kabul city. The whole population rely on the groundwater. And then there is more infrastructure to this infrastructure cost. Like, people don't know why they have cracks on their house, and every year they have to spend thousands of dollars just to fix those cracks. And next year it's happening again and again, but they think it's okay, it's because of the earthquakes, but it's also the groundwater that they are using. And now it's contaminated now also. So many issues with the irrigation system. They started, but I don't know how long they will go, or are the projects are not funded anymore, and the communities, whatever they had, they are having it, and let's see how far they will go in the future.
Thanks a lot. I think that was the last question. There is no more questions here.
Can I come have with a final comment?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
You're most welcome.
No, I just want to say before we end that I think this is a very serious issue that we are discussing, and it's very important to create awareness about it and the consequences of climate change on the livelihoods of people in Afghanistan. And I think we should also change the way we are thinking around it. I think we should go away from the supply-driven models of thinking to more a demand-driven model of thinking. And I think we should start to think a little bit smaller and not that big. If we are going to improve the situation and make adaptation to climate change possible. So that was my final comment.
Can I have a few words? So I also want to add, because I'm looking more from the academia side. We are not able to do research anymore. Exactly. And we cannot send the fundings to our colleagues. And the colleagues who used to collaborate with us, they don't have anything else to do now at the moment. They were in academia. You have to be busy to do some research and go to field, collect data, understand, and do the analysis and write the reports on it. And it's not happening at the moment. The university situations, we all know what's happening, and it's getting worse every day. So and when we cannot transfer the funds, the international community or the European institutions, if they cannot transfer funds to universities and to local colleagues so they can do their jobs. Like, for example, in the recent earthquake in Afghanistan, which happened, we wanted to set up more seismic station to understand why so much damage was caused. We cannot send it anymore because the law stops us, because the institution don't want to get with the European constitutions and laws of sanctions on Afghanistan. And at the same time, we have stations already, hydrometeorological stations, very advanced tools. They are all offline, and they need only like $100 equipment to be online back. But this $100 we cannot provide it. So if we find an alternative routes through NGOs or through the UN organization or whatever, if this is allowed, then it would be a very good path to continue the research. It will be also interesting for the academia in Afghanistan to get involved in who still are in Afghanistan, and it will also help us to understand the vast impact of the climate change in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Najib. So I think that the main conclusion is a lot can be done with limited funding if we just get the funding through.
And do it right.
And do it right. And a major learn from the last 20 years from looking at the meta-evaluation of development project is that large-scale projects have failed, small-scale projects have succeeded. I'll stop by that. I just want to say thanks a lot for those who have been here today and for those who have followed us on Zoom. If I'm right, this will later be posted on website, and I will encourage everyone to take a look, to continue to take a look at social media and the websites of Bergen Global and upcoming events here, and also the Afghanistan Committee, where I see a lot of these discussions are going on as well. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your attention.